Hello viewers, welcome back. We are now looking at how long to forecast for in a DCF model. And that's what we are going to look at for now. So what we are looking at for now is how long to forecast for in a DCF model. And it's a common DCF modeling question. So what we want to discuss here is a very common DCF modeling question. In fact, you may encounter this exact question as a technical component in a financial interview. Exactly how long do you need to forecast for in a DCF model? Really common for people to come and say, well, you would probably need to build a model that extends for, let's say, 5 years, or maybe for 10 years, 20 years, and so on. One fact is that the correct answer to this question, how long do we forecast, is that you need to forecast forever. You need to forecast forever. So we forecast forever. So let's take a look at why we should forecast forever. In other words, it is in that format because we want to make sure that we understand what we are talking about. So we want to make sure that we understand what we are discussing, and then we are going to talk about exactly how we are going to accomplish that. Because what do you mean by saying you forecast forever? Because forever has no limit, it is at infinity. So how are we going to accomplish that, if that's basically the task that we have to do? Now, often when we are doing valuation work, we start with the assumption that the business is a going concern. We assume that the business is a going concern. Let's think about what a going concern means. This is an accounting term, and it essentially means that if you assume that the business is a going concern, then you are assuming that it's going to continue to operate indefinitely. In other words, it will not stop operating indefinitely. It's going to operate indefinitely. So what we are essentially assuming here is that the company is going to last forever. It means that we need to forecast the cash flows forever into the future. So, because now someone is going to be wondering, how exactly are we going to be doing this? Because after all, if you look at Excel, the software, the Microsoft Excel as a software itself, and you move all the way to the right hand side within your worksheet, so you find that spreadsheet, if you find that spreadsheet, you would see that it actually only has a fixed number of columns, and they're about 16,000. The columns, those that are moving downwards, A, B, C, up until you reach the last one. Meaning within our Excel, since we are, remember we are forecasting in Excel, but Excel has a limit of about 16,000 columns. Now the question is, How are we going to be able to forecast forever, yet Excel is having a limit? So the solution is, so the way we are going to forecast forever is if we are working inside a spreadsheet that has a fixed width, then the trick that we are going to use is that we are going to make sure that the key to forecasting forever is really understanding that there is two parts to a typical DCF forecast. In other words, for you to be able to forecast forever, you need to make sure that you understand that this DCF forecast should actually have two typical forecasts. Now, those two parts, they are going to separate our cash flows into two. So the first part we are going to call it our discrete forecasts. And the second part is going to be a terminal value forecast. In other words, for it, it's not even a forecast, it's going to be a terminal value, because we just get only one value to represent the entire forever assumption. So part one is going to have, the discrete. So part one is going to have the discrete forecast, and then part two is going to be having the terminal value. So the two parts to a typical DCF forecast, those two parts to a typical DCF forecast. One, we've said it is a discrete forecast, and second, we've said it's a terminal value. Now, let's start by looking at this part one. Let's focus on this part one here, what we call the discrete forecast, and how we can define it. So this part of the forecast shows the first few years when the company is growing faster than the economy. In other words, we define these discrete forecasts as the type of forecasts that shows the first few years when the company is growing faster than the economy. And what happens over time is that the growth for the company may slow in later years. So the first thing is that the few years when the company grows faster than the economy. Then the other key idea to note is that over time, the growth of the company slows down in those preceding years. And that may be as a result of maybe competition, maybe there are so many people who have entered in the market and now they have taken away the market share. So as a result of competitors that have entered the market, eventually the company reaches a steady state. So when the company reaches a steady state, in other words, it reaches its climax, the stable state. And this doesn't mean that the company is actually going to stop working or to stop growing. But the steady state just refers to when a company is effectively growing in line with the economy or at the same pace as the overall economy. In other words, they are growing at almost the same pace. Because there are so many competitors that came in, even at a certain point that you can be able to determine the next month or the next quarter sales. Because you'll find that these sales are not going to be changing over time. In other words, the change will be there, but it is just almost the same, which is not the case at the point when the company is still growing. Because when you start your business, you've gotten the market and people are buying, the company is growing at a faster rate, but it reaches at a time when other people realize that these guys are actually making profits and they join the business. Just like the way you've seen that we had Coca-Cola taking up the world. You've seen Pepsi coming in, meaning they have started producing almost the same products. So the market is now shared. There are other companies that keep on joining, like Harish International. You find that there are other companies that are coming in. So when they come in, it reaches at a point that the company is going to be almost selling, or almost its sales can actually be forecasted exactly. In other words, someone can say, today we've made 2 trillions. So tomorrow we might make maybe 3. This month we made 3 trillion, so next month it may be 5. But the difference is actually not all that high. In other words, that's the time that we say that a company is now growing almost at the same space as at the same pace as the economy. So that's what we are referring to that stage. So when a company reaches a steady state and start growing in line with the economy, that is the point at which part 1 has ended and now part 2 has begun. In other words, if you reach at the steady state, maybe you can actually approximately guess that next month we shall sell this. It means it's almost constant. It's like you are getting almost the same sales year after year. So you find that the moment you reach that steady state, or you have reached the climax, we expect, if the company is not going to be managed well, you will fall. But if you don't fall, then it means you are going to maintain that same level. So when you maintain that same level, it's where we look at the terminal value, because it will be almost the same that we will get this year, the other year. That's when we can finalize and we can be able to compute the terminal values using the terminal growth rate. So part 2, which is the terminal value, is the part of the valuation. This part 2 here is that part of valuation which continues indefinitely in the future or forever, but it's not practical to forecast cash flows forever in a financial model that has a limited width. We've said when we are using Excel, we find that Excel has approximately 16,300 and something. Those are the columns that are within our spreadsheet. One worksheet has that. So what we do is we use a growing perpetuity formula. We use the growing perpetuity formula because there is no way it's not practical for us to forecast forever. So we use the growing perpetuity formula, and that formula is the one that we are going to use to value the perpetual growing cash flows. So now we have a basic overview of these 2 parts, because what we've just seen is actually the basics. But since these are going to be very important as far as financial modeling is concerned, we need to have these practical computations. So, since we have now gotten the basic overview of these two parts, part one, the company is growing faster than the overall economy. In other words, that's the period when there are so many customers and the products are few. Even the production lines are not actually working. Even if they're working at full capacity, but the demand is there, they can't complete it. And now, in part two, the company grows in line with the overall economy. In other words, it's growing in that same pace indefinitely or forever. So what we will do now in the next video, we are going to dive in and we look at each of these two parts so that we can understand exactly how all the mathematical calculations work and how are we going to construct our model. So in the next video, we are going to start off by looking at the discrete forecasts. So let's meet in the next video as we look at the discrete forecast. Thank you for watching.